Hello, welcome back. And of course, if you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Tracy, and in this video, I'm going to share with you a couple of very frightening tales of Mothman encounters. So stay tuned. In yesterday's Halloween Spooktacular video, I discussed with you the bird monster of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, who actually turned out to be more like the Mothman. So in this video, we're going to cover more of the Mothman because there have been encounters with this creature in multiple locations all over. So the Mothman is generally described as human-like, all black, with leathery wings, and the wings are sometimes described to look like a cloak or a cape. And sometimes the Mothman is even described as having glowing red eyes. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you two other stories of the Mothman. Of course, those would be found in the monster book, which I've been sharing with you guys during this year's Halloween Spooktacular. Okay, so this first story I'm going to share about the Houston Space Center Mothman starts like this. The author of the book actually got this story from Desiree, who is the daughter of the man who worked for the Houston Space Center. So this is kind of like her take on what she remembers from her father telling this story. She says, "It was late one night in 1986, said Desiree, when her father returned from his daily routine at the Johnson Space Center. There was nothing particularly unusual about that," she elaborated, as her father was occasionally required to work late into the night. On this particular night, however, things were very different. Her father was clearly deeply distressed and even seemed to be on the verge of lapsing into a full-blown anxiety attack. After Desiree and her mother were finally able to calm him down, her father told of a wild and extraordinary story. While walking to his car that night, he had seen, to his complete and utter horror, perched on a nearby building, a large man-like figure that was utterly black in color and that seemed to have a large cape draped across its shoulders and back, and with two huge wing-like appendages sticking out of each side of the cape. Looking more bat-like than bird-like, the wings made a cracking noise as they slowly flapped in the strong, howling wind. The creature, Desiree's father told his amazed family, had clearly realized it had been seen. Not only that, he gained the very distinct impression that the beast was actually relishing that it had been noticed. And it was even seemingly deriving some form of deranged evil pleasure from the fact that it had struck terror in the heart of the man. He could only stand and stare, frozen to the spot in complete and abject fear. Which, let me just add, so many tales of whether it's Hat Man, which I had discussed in a previous video, or Shadow People, or the Werecat, which I also described in another video. Anytime someone has an encounter with these things, a lot of times they just say they're frozen and all they can do is stare. So anyway, I just kind of want to point that out. It's almost like it captivates people's attention when they see something so strange. So they do usually get a very good look at what it is they see because they're actually standing there staring at it for quite a while. So anyway, the sheer horrific unreality of the situation, namely that of seeing a large, dark, gargoyle-like entity looming ominously over him from a rooftop at NASA's Johnson Space Center, finally hit home with full force, and Desiree's father raced for his car, flung the door open, slammed it shut, and then sped off into the darkness. He did not attempt to look back even once. Not surprisingly, the family suggested that reporting the encounter to his supervisors might not be the wisest move. Desiree's father agreed, for a short while anyway. After a few weeks, however, the strange event was still gnawing steadily away at his mind and nerves, and he eventually confided in his immediate supervisor, who, to his great surprise and relief, revealed that this was not the first time such a vile entity had been seen late at night roaming around the more shadowy parts of the Johnson Space Center. In other words, he was not going crazy or hallucinating. The beast was real, and he was not the only witness either. Indeed, a secret file on the matter had reportedly been opened some months earlier. Primarily because of, on one occasion, and in the very same location where the winged fiend had been seen, the remains of 2 dead and horrifically mutilated German shepherds had been found, their bodies drained of significant amounts of blood. And as a result of this latest encounter, Desiree's father was himself grilled intently about his encounter, about his experience by NASA security people who were flown in from somewhere in Arizona. That much I know. As Desiree succinctly worded it. As for the flying monster, reportedly at least, it was never seen again. So Desiree's dad works at this Johnson Space Center for NASA and sees this odd entity, who we can now call Mothman based on the description. But isn't it weird that as soon as he told his supervisor, that is when he found out that there has been, basically there was a file opened just months earlier with the same types of encounters. And it even points out that the file was opened because of the 2 dead German shepherds found near the scene of that encounter. So that is so creepy, because obviously he felt creeped out for a reason. This was not a normal encounter. So let's move on to the next story. This one it's from Sandling Park, Hythe, Kent, England. This is all the way across the ocean in England. Okay, you guys? So, midway through November 1963, one of the most chilling and eerie of all monster encounters on record occurred in the dark and shadowy environment of Sandling Park, Hythe, Kent, England. It was an encounter that, in terms of the description of the creature, provokes Mothman-style imagery, even though the latter famous creature did not hit the headlines in and around Point Pleasant, West Virginia until the mid-1960s. So let's remember, a lot of these entities and encounters, it's almost like once the story hits the masses or hits like the general population, all of a sudden there are always way more encounters, and everyone comes out with their story about it. Now, the reason that they pointed out that the monster of Point Pleasant, West Virginia was not until the mid-1960s is because that is the first time that this Mothman bird monster creature was really brought forth into public knowledge. So anyway, let's go back to the story. So, although Sandling Park was certainly shrouded in overwhelming darkness at the time of the beastly event, it was hardly the sort of place where one would expect to encounter nothing less than a fully fledged monster. Amazingly, however, and according to a group of terrified witnesses, that is exactly what happened. John Flaxton, age 17 on the night that all hell broke loose, was accompanied by 3 friends, including 18-year-old Mervyn Hutchinson. As they walked along a lane running by the park, after returning from a local Friday night dance, the group of friends became aware of a bright object moving overhead. which they at first took to be nothing stranger than a star. How very wrong they turned out to be. The teenagers were amazed and more than a bit scared by the object's presence as they watched it hover and then drop out of sight behind a group of trees. The boys decided to leave the area with haste, but the light soon loomed into view again. It hovered around 10 feet from the ground and at an approximate distance of 200 feet, then once again went out of sight. It was a bright and gold oval, one of the boys reported, and when we moved, it moved. When we stopped, it stopped. That was not necessarily a good sign. Suddenly, the boys heard the snapping of twigs from a nearby thicket, and out from the wooded area shuffled a creature of horrendous appearance. It was the size of a human, reported Mervyn Hutchinson, but it didn't seem to have any head. There were wings on its back, like bat wings. The group fled, perhaps understandably not wanting to hang around and see what developed next. Matters didn't end there, however. 5 nights later, one Keith Croucher saw an unusual object float across a nearby soccer field. 48 hours after that, one John McGoldrick, accompanied by a friend, checked out the location and stumbled upon unusual impressions in the ground, which gave every indication that something solid and significant had actually landed there. Neil Arnold, a researcher of paranormal and monstrous phenomena who lives in the county of Kent, has this to say about the matter. Local UFO experts believe that the case was nothing more than a misinterpretation of natural phenomenon. But Flaxton recalled, "I felt cold all over." And as Arnold also notes, 3 giant footprints were also found in the vicinity, which were said to have measured 2 feet long and 9 inches across. On the 11th of December, various newspaper reporters accompanied McGoldrick to the area and found that the woods were illuminated by an eerie, glowing light. No one investigated any further, and the case faded as mysteriously as it had emerged. To this date, the saga of the Mothman of Hythe, Kent, remains precisely that, a mystery. So, even in the first story, it's like, as soon as he had his experience, it was never reported again, at least to his knowledge and to the daughter's knowledge. And of course, in this one, it's like, as soon as people realize that something paranormal might actually be going on, all of a sudden, the investigation ends and people just kind of hope that it fades into obscurity. So I think that the Mothman is creepy, and I'm still trying to figure out in my mind, like, what is the Mothman? Is it alien? Because in England, in those stories, they were talking about a glowing light coming from the woods. They were also talking about what they thought was a star until they realized it moved when they moved and stopped when they stopped. And then, of course, there is the account of what seemed to have crashed in the field. So what do you guys think? Is the Mothman real? And what is it? Is it something paranormal? Is it something extraterrestrial? Or is it all in their imagination? I don't know. But let us know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, be sure to like this video if you like it. Give it that thumbs up. And thank you guys so much for watching. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.